Welcome to In the Know with Kat Bobineau. Today, my guest is a good friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer Abrams, and she is here from Houston via UCSF. Welcome to In the Know with Kat Bobineau.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
All right, well, I'm glad you're here too. Let us know and let the audience know what it is that you do.
Well, currently I am a postdoc at UCSF and I'm working in drug development and neurodegenerative diseases. So the basic idea is that I'm working with chemists to test drugs that they develop and see how they work inside of cells. So I do cell-based testing for drug development. And the focus of my work is prion disease, which is not one of the more common neurodegenerative diseases. Alzheimer's as well as Parkinson's disease are a lot more well known. ALS became very well known with Ice Bucket Challenge, and so there's a lot that are more well known. But prion disease is mad cow disease. Is one form of human prion disease.
Okay.
And so that, as well as some genetic-based diseases and some sporadic diseases such as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and Gerstlin-Straussler-Scheinker syndrome.
I don't think I've heard of either one of
GSS
those.
and CJD.
Okay.
So these are more prevalent forms of prion disease.
Okay.
But mad cow, because it's acquired, usually is focused on. And so these diseases are basically very similar to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in how it develops, but it usually the incubation time once the symptom onset. From there, it's usually about 3 to 6 months before death.
Oh my.
So it's sort of a really fast version of a
Yeah.
neurodegenerative disease, and if we can figure out how to treat or cure, or reverse some of the effects that cause this disease, it could shine a lot of light on how we could do it for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's as well, because it's very similar causes for all three diseases.
Wow, that is a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
That's great. So talking about those diseases, because I've never even heard of these diseases.
Right.
So mad cow disease is when you ingest
Yes,
bad beef.
so that's acquired. Yes.
Right. So about the other two diseases, because I'm not even going to try and say those.
Right.
Are those
GSS is primarily genetic. So
Genetic.
means you have a genetic mutation in a specific gene, which is prion protein, and it leads to basically what's called misfolding. So proteins have folds that are related to
Right.
their function, just like your chair is in a certain way so that you can sit on it.
Right.
If it was flat, it wouldn't be as useful for sitting up, right?
Right.
So proteins also have shapes that are very specific to what they do. And if you get a genetic mutation within the gene, it can cause a change in the protein that causes a shape malfunction.
Right.
And then they aggregate and they lead to what we know in Alzheimer's disease as like plaques and basically cell death
Right.
in the brain. And that leads to all the symptoms that are well known for these diseases, such as the movement issues and the memory and the aggression and the mood problems. All of these things stem from cell death occurring in the brain.
Wow. Those must have smaller numbers of occurrences because it's
Yes.
not a very well-known disease. Or
Right.
Neither one of them are very well-known.
Right.
So that's amazing. And what got you even interested in these types of diseases?
Right. So I went to graduate school in Houston at University of Texas Health Science Center. And so there my focus was microbiology and molecular genetics. So I was actually doing my work in yeast, but I was already studying protein folding because yeast actually acts as a great model for human cells. Most of the processes, the main processes in the cell, are conserved from yeast to humans, but it's a lot simpler of an organism. It's a single-celled organism.
Right.
So we're able to, make predictions based on the studies we do in yeast and then translate it into human cells or into animal models. So I was studying the idea of these proteins reaching their final functional conformation in yeast, and then we were using those ideas, which can be translated into human cells. And so I first got interested in how proteins reach their final functional conformation. And then after that, I really want it to be closer to making treatments. Like I want it to be closer to how is this going to get to humans.
Right.
And so my next step, I figured I should do drug development because that's how you actually get it there. I knew the basis, but I wanted to move like one step from basic science into more translational science.
Okay. So you wanted to take what you've learned about how proteins are made and how they become the shape that they are.
Yes.
And then how we can use that information to fight off different diseases.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
So in what field of science does that fall under?
So it can fall under pharmaceutical science. It can fall under drug development is actually a field in science now. So like on my resume, I'm in drug development. And so that covers like everything from conceptually coming up with a compound or a drug that does something in cells, all the way up to this is what it does, this is what it can cure or treat, and putting it out, marketing it. So that's all drug development.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what is your specific degree in then?
Okay, so my PhD, again, is in microbiology and molecular genetics, and my postdoc, I would say, is in pharmaceutical chemistry because that's the department I'm in, but I'm a cell biologist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So cell biology and microbiology, as people may not really know, is studying something small, something micro, something that you can't see with the naked eye.
Right.
And so you got into that. How did you decide that was the PhD that you wanted to go into?
That was stemming all the way from, I would say, high school.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I grew up in Houston, and I went to Michael DeBakey High School for Health Professions. And so this was a high school that was very focused on teaching, we would work in the hospital, we learned medical terminology, we learned dentistry, we learned like all of the fields in medicine and patient treatment. We learned patient care. I worked in nursing in our county hospital, Ben Taub Hospital in Houston. I worked in the emergency room at Ben Taub. So it was intense.
Oh, yeah, I bet it was. Emergency room.
And literally up until high school, I was like, I'm going to be a medical doctor. This is what I'm going to do. And then I worked in the hospital.
Right.
I was like, I am not going to be a medical doctor for sure. It was just not quite fitting for me. And so I was like, but I'm so interested in why people get sick and why are we so limited on what we can treat and what we can't. And, there's so many questions out there that need to be answered.
Right.
And so that's what made me realize. I was like, I think science is the way to go. Went to college, majored in biochemistry and then genetics and then biotechnology. So covered all those bases. And then from there, I learned about doing research and becoming a scientist. Because prior to that, I didn't really even think of science as a job.
Right.
I knew doctor was a job, and I knew there were people doing research, but I just assumed that was doctors.
Right.
I didn't realize that was a whole career in itself.
I feel like that is something that I discuss a lot of times, especially on the show, about, so you made two parts that I wanted to discuss.
Okay.
First was going into a field that you think you may want to do and then actually seeing how it plays out. And so that's what I always tell people, especially parents who talk to me about their kids. Let them volunteer somewhere.
Yes.
Yes. And that goes for you. You thought you was, I'm being a doctor.
Yeah,
I'm going to take that to the doctor.
And it took about 3 weeks for me to realize that was not what I wanted to do.
Exactly. You need to put yourself in the situation.
In the situation.
In
100%.
that job. Absolutely.
I don't care what it is. Pharmaceuticals, go stand next to a pharmacist. Figure out what they do.
Right.
Because you think you want to do that until you're counting pills.
Right.
Like, you need to know what the job is.
You have to have a better understanding of what you're going to get
Absolutely.
into before you even set foot into that.
Yes, because you can waste a lot of unnecessary time.
Right.
Like, just working your way up to something, putting in a lot of effort, and then realizing, not for me. And you don't want to skip around for your whole life, And to make another point, not everyone has access. So, like, some people have parents that are lawyers and doctors. And so they are getting some exposure their whole life to these fields, and they're hearing their parents talk about it and stuff like that. But in some cases, people grow up not having those role models, not having access to that. So certainly, like, look for those opportunities. Parents and kids, like, talk to your counselors at school. Look for those opportunities to volunteer or shadow someone.
Exactly. Like, I know in our day and age, even if you don't know someone in that field, or you can't seem to find someone, like, Google is so easy,
Yes.
and finding someone. There's a lot of people out there who want to share their expertise, and
Absolutely.
they want to teach people. And so, that's a PSA, is
Yes.
to get out there and find someone.
Yes.
And then
Absolutely.
secondary, from what you said, was you didn't even know science was a career option.
No.
And I want you to elaborate on that. Like, why didn't you know? What do you think you were lacking in high school that you didn't know science was even an option?
I think because I actually, went to fantastic schools. But there's something about how certain fields are glorified and certain fields aren't.
Yes.
So while we were learning from doctors and dentists and, the only lab person that I came in contact with was a medical laboratory specialist. So this is a specific job in a hospital where you're testing samples. And I mean, I did urinalysis, blood work. That's the only scientist that I saw. There wasn't like a scientist teaching a class.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we had doctors. Yes, they were scientists teaching the courses, but they weren't teaching it in the sense that this is also a career that you can learn to do other than being a professor. Like, you can be a scientist aside from being a professor, which you also can do with science. But, they never highlighted that part as a career, which needs to be done in school. Like, this is a career too.
I think that's where we are lacking a lot of times when it comes to the different career paths that people are taking in STEM, which is why I do this show.
Exactly.
And to highlight the idea that there are so many people doing so many different things. And I mean, even you coming from Houston, now you're in California. And we were talking about something off camera that we're going to bring on camera now. What we was talking about earlier was you're kind of transitioning now from doing lab work into another field.
Yes.
And so could you talk about your internship you're doing now?
Sure. So I am currently kind of shifting from my postdoc. So I'm getting additional training in the field of science. So doing my drug development. But I noticed that, some of my skill sets hit more on communication and, other areas and helping others, supporting scientists, kind of that area. And that's kind of where my passion is. That's where it lies. Like, I'm happiest when I'm helping a scientist, move forward. And so in that line of thought, I thought, translational science is a good way to do it, but then how do you get trained? And like, what is people don't define translational science, and translation is just the idea of bench to bedside. And so there's a lot of things encompassed in that. And so I decided that the best way to do that is to learn how technology moves from the bench to the bedside. And so there was an internship at our tech transfer office. And I decided this would be a great opportunity to learn how to analyze technology and determine patentability of things. So when something is new and novel and important for health, we want to patent it and protect it so it can be, given to companies and nonprofits and places that can move that technology forward and get it to the public. So that is the main driving factor of that office, is to get technology to the public as fast as possible and as safely as possible as well, right?
Yeah.
So we work with lawyers and doctors and the PIs who are inventing, the inventors, and we basically determine if their technology is a good candidate to move forward for patenting and to continue for either additional research or into hospitals and for treatment. So
that's really cool. I mean, I wanted just to highlight the fact that you followed your first passion, which was science. You got your PhD in it. You worked in that field, but you don't have to stay in that field. And you can use your expertise, the things you've learned, to translate that to a whole nother identity and a whole nother career path.
Yes.
And so what do you see as like a future for what you're trying to do now?
Okay, so like I'm very interested in doing this type of work, but in industry. So that means pharmaceutical industry or biotechnology, where they're developing tech for the health sciences. And so I want to do that from the business perspective. And what that means is business development is a field where your main job is creating relationships between companies that can commercialize or distribute a product and the inventors, the scientists, the small companies or the academic labs that are producing the science. And so I like to talk. Shocker. And so I knew that I needed a high communication job, and business development is that. You need to understand people, you need to understand science, you need to understand all these things and kind of pull that together to create those connections between industry and the science that's being produced.
So, kind of in a nutshell, what you want to do is you kind of want to be the liaison
Yes.
between the people doing the work and the people who's getting that work out to the public.
Exactly.
So that's a really interesting thing. And so, have you found that the work you've done previously really highlights the work you can do when it comes to being a translation scientist?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Understanding the process from the beginning to the end is important. Knowing the time it takes to really do science matters.
Right.
Because you have to, when you're analyzing technology, you have to understand, not only what the scientists have already produced, but what needs to be done before it's ready to either be licensed out to a company or to be ready for the public.
Right.
And so just understanding the process of science and the diligence and like what it takes to get there is important. Also, this isn't a field where you do one thing. So you have to be able to understand a range of science. And I mean, during your PhD, you're constantly exposed to all types of science, and you're helping all different types of people, and you're interacting with all different types of scientists. So you have to become, well versed in multiple fields. Usually that's true for most people. I mean, you just have to these days to keep up with science. I mean, there's thousands of papers coming out a day, and you have to learn to some extent to keep up with that.
Yeah.
And so it really, when you're presented with a new case and you're like, oh, okay, we want a technology that does this, or we want a technology that treats cancer, and now we want something that's for neurodegenerative, you have to be able to kind of switch that quickly and learn as much as you can about it. And that's what a PhD teaches you to do, is think.
Okay.
And so it's definitely applicable to what I'm going to be doing in the future.
That is amazing. Yes. And it makes me want to go back into kind of what you're talking about a little bit, or kind of merge what you're talking about, which is a new industry coined biotechnology. And so could you let the audience know, how do you feel about biotechnology and the merge of science and technology to administer drugs, to check your heart rate, to do all these new things that biotech is doing?
Yeah. So I think it's great. I think it's fantastic, because what it does is it kind of, slims up that gap that I'm talking about, from being an academic lab at a university to being in industry and distributing a product. That gap is sort of closing with biotechnology, because now people are leaving. Labs are stemming off companies now, small companies. And now there's, in biotechnology, you may hear the term incubator space. And what this is places like J Labs, Johnson & Johnson, and other major companies are providing space for scientists to just have like a bench or something where they can develop their product for low cost. And they're providing a lot of the common equipment, the big expensive equipment, big freezers, autoclaves, things like that you need. They'll provide it in a space, and you just rent an area. And so this allows scientists to leave from the lab. We had a student graduate with her PhD and immediately started a company out of her PhD. So she was a CEO.
Oh, wow.
From right out of her PhD.
Yeah.
And she's doing fantastic.
Okay.
She raised her own money. She did a lot. And then they were able to hire people and help out with finances and, help with all that stuff. But I mean, it was amazing to watch her be able to walk straight out of the lab from graduation and start a company.
Now,
Yeah.
is that here or is that in
It's
Houston?
here.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep. Fantastic. So, yeah, I really think biotechnology is a good push for that, and it's a good push to get things out to the public in the fastest way we can.
Wow. That is amazing. And I've been hearing that. I've been hearing PhDs walking straight out and getting their own companies, and medical doctors,
Yes.
MDs walking straight
Yep.
out and either working for a biotech company or starting their own biotech company.
Absolutely. I mean, who knows better what's needed than the people out there doing the work, you
Right.
know? I mean, because biotech can range from everything from supplies for the lab, improved kits, things like that, to making drugs and developing compounds and stuff that can treat humans. And then doctors come out and make medical devices for the surgeries they're doing and,
Right.
you know, things like that. So it's, you know, it ranges all over the place, but this is like a place where everyone can come together and work to really make things better. You see improvements at lightning speed. It's fantastic.
Wow. Okay. So, I just want to now go back a little bit more. When you were in high school, or even pre-high school, before you went to that amazing high school you told us about, did you have anyone in your life influencing you in STEM or in science, and was like, this is probably the pathway you should go into?
Well, my parents have always, first of all, let's start there, because they made sure to put me in good schools coming up, and you know, my mom pushed to get me into Bakey.
Okay.
And so my brother before me also went that route. Now he is a person who also went in thinking he was going to be a medical doctor. We both did, and he went another route. He went tech, so he is a programmer now. And so, you know, I think seeing him do it, for one, I knew he wanted to be in medicine, so I was kind of influenced by that as well. And then just being at that school really pushed it forward. I loved learning about the body and how it works and, you know, that kind of stuff, even though it didn't end exactly how I imagined. But then also, you know, my parents were big influence. And I'm not going to lie, TV was in it a little bit. Like, I saw the doctors on ER. Yeah, I'm a little bit older.
We won't even
Yeah.
go talk about that.
And, you know, it was, like, exciting. I was like, oh, my God, people are, like, curing people and helping people. And I was like, this sounds like something I would love. And where it came close on a lot of fronts, it just missed for me for a few fronts. But, yeah, I definitely enjoyed, you know, being in the medical field and having the Texas Medical Center right there. I mean,
it was right there.
And my mom worked at Herman Hospital in Houston when I was younger. I mean, she was in medical records, but like she worked in a hospital environment, and she also, previous to that, did research at MD Anderson.
Oh, wow.
She was working in the research department with one of the doctors, helping them, you know, sort their information and things like that. So
so you had a lot of exposure growing up.
Yes.
A lot of exposure. And so how do you feel all that exposure you had going off to school? How do you feel about diversity in your area of expertise?
That's not great.
Okay.
Doing better, but there is a big gap. I mean, the African American representation's really low. And it's to a detriment. I mean, the amount of professors that are in the sciences are just not even comprehensible. I mean, it's so low.
Oh, wow.
It's ridiculous. You know, there's a little bit more of a Latino representation, but it's still not great. So, I mean, there's definitely there's a lot more women in school right now, but still at the professor level, at the CEO level, we're hurting. It's moving slow, a lot more slowly than it should be, not only just for the people in those groups, but for science and, you know, technology in general. If you have no diversity, I mean, you're going to cap what you can do, and you're going to limit it.
Right, exactly.
And I mean, it's been shown over and over that having women on boards make companies more money, you know, having minorities and people from different backgrounds coming together helps move ideas forward more quickly.
Right.
And this is something I'm seeing now at companies like Novartis, Genentech. They're pushing for diversity and not just hiring, because that's the problem. You see that all the time.
Right.
They bring a lot of people in, and then slowly those people fall right back out.
Yeah.
And the reason is the environment is not conducive. And that's true for science through education, through the workforce. If you don't have a diverse environment, it's usually not an inclusive feel to it.
Right.
And that's what loses a lot of people. And I've dealt with that a lot throughout my career.
Yeah, it's really hard to want to be so focused on what projects you're working on and what you're doing if you're the only one there.
Yep.
You know, and I mean,
it's very true.
You can talk to a variety of people. I mean, I can talk to anyone, but it is somewhat easier when there's like another woman there.
Yes.
Or, you know, someone of another African American there for me.
Yes.
You know, and just having a diverse group, because a diverse group brings so much more to the table. The conversation changes.
Yes.
You know, you learn about things you may not have learned about if you didn't have an inclusive type of group.
And it helps to have those groups, because those groups also promote more openness. And it's not just about, you know, diversity isn't just color or gender. It's all sorts of things.
Right.
And until you create an environment where all those things are represented, then you won't have an environment where all those things are accepted.
Right.
And so the acceptance is what we need to feel like we belong.
Right.
I mean, one of the biggest separations for any minority in science is not identifying as a scientist and not identifying with the environment that they're part of. And that's what makes you fall off, because you need to feel the support and like you're part of something.
Right.
Or it doesn't translate. I mean, this is hard work. It's stressful. You know, you need that, you know, to feel like I'm part of this group, so they're supporting me too.
Right.
And that, I think that's missing.
Yeah. And then also, like what you were saying, as identifying as a scientist or identifying as anyone in STEM, you know, you need to see that. You need to see people like that. I mean, even as a child, you need to grow up seeing people like that. So you watched ER, thinking you wanted to be a medical doctor, and I watched ER. So we're the same age. But, you know, the reason why I do this show and the reason why I have guests like you is to show that there's way more diversity in these fields than is proclaimed out there, and how a lot of kids are seeing, and hopefully they can see this and see someone.
We are out there.
Yeah, we are there.
We're out there.
We are there, and we are interested in these fields, and it doesn't mean we're not interested in other stuff. And so along those lines, you want to tell the audience what you do outside of work, like your hobbies and things you do like that?
Yeah, so I guess I have diverse hobbies. Like I like the general stuff too, movies, things like that to do outside, but I also really like to do my nails. As you can see, they're done. And it's just like a relaxing, fun thing for me to do. And yes, sometimes I go to lab or something and people are like, what? But I'm like, look, awesome, right? And they're like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. It starts conversations and stuff. So I enjoy doing it. It's relaxing for me.
I, for one, could never really get my nails done, because working with animals and working with those liquids and acetone.
Yes, pain.
Really no reason.
It's a pain. I wash my hands like 25 times a day. So I do them, and then tomorrow it'll be chipped everywhere. So it really is for, you know, it's the journey, right? Not the end result. So it's actually doing it that makes me happy. And so that's an area I really like. I'm trying, since moving to California, to do more outdoors things. I know, like coming from Houston, you just sweat outdoors. So that's it. That's the only activity.
I've been in Texas. I live in Dallas, and a short stint in Houston. This time, like, I have on long sleeve. Right. It's cold out here.
I have this on.
But you cannot wear that in Texas today.
No, it's not as many outdoors activity. You have a few months in the winter, you might want to. You got a little bit of fall and a little bit of spring to maybe do something. Yeah, and then it's also pretty flat. So, like, you know, I go hiking here on several, I call them mountains, but I understand they're probably not mountains.
Well, we have some mountains.
Yeah, and so I go hiking up those every now and then, and so I'm getting into some new stuff, because new environment, you gotta, you know, win and roam.
Exactly, you gotta be out there hiking, dancing. I mean, I'm born and raised here, but I was gone for like 10 years. I'm starting to come back and be like, oh, you guys are what now?
Yeah, exactly.
This is it. I'm gonna try it.
Oh yes, dancing. That's another one. Love to dance. Love to dance. Yeah, that's a great hobby. I don't do it enough.
Oh man, and so like, what you do outside of work and what you do at work, I mean, that makes you the complete person.
Yes.
You know, you're not this cookie cutter scientist
No.
that's gonna wear glasses, and I know you can probably do wear a lab coat, but
Yeah.
you know,
That's required.
yeah, that's required. But like, if there was someone like a young person who sees you and they say, "Oh, you know, I'm kind of artsy. I like my nails done, I like my hair done, but I have a general interest in science." What would you like to tell them?
You can absolutely be part of it. I mean, we are making what science is. So, you know, if this is something you love to do it. Absolutely do it. We need more artists. I mean, artists bring a different type of creativity to science. I mean, I just went and saw someone who was, you know, designing an apparatus, and he's like physically designing this with his hands. Like, you know, having another perspective on these things is so important. And, you know, so follow what you love to do, no matter, don't let, you know, your interest in thinking that science is not, you know, one thing or the other. It's everything. It's what you make it.
Wow. Well, looks like we're kind of running out of time. And so I want to say thank you to Dr. Abrams for coming in today and blessing us with her job and what she does. And I want to say, if you have any questions for Dr. Abrams, you can feel free to email me and I will send them her way. And if you want to get in contact with her or know about her internships or her postdocs, let me know. And to my great audience, I just want to say thank you for tuning in again for this episode of In the Know with Kat Bobineau. And until next time.